We are now moving to the next point in our agenda, and it is my real pleasure to welcome Maria Vassilakou to us. Also, she is connected online. She is connected to us from Vienna. Maria is part of the European Mission Board, which is related to the topic of climate resilient and smart cities. This mission board has a pivotal role in determining what the next European research strategy and funds will look like. So what she is being able to tell us about the mission of that board will be very interesting to us. I hope Maria can hear us and join us. We are at the moment establishing the connection. Maria Vassilakou has been deputy mayor of the city of Vienna. She was born in Greece, then moved to Vienna where she studied and became deputy mayor of the city of Vienna. And in her time as executive city councillor in this role, also for urban planning, but also for participation of the people of the city, which is entwined in this one position she had. She was responsible for a transformation agenda in which a lot of projects made Vienna, according to international rankings, to one of the world's most livable cities. And I'm very pleased to see you now on our screen, Maria. That's great to have you with us. And in your talk, in your keynote presentation now, you will share with us your view, let's say not only on the practical approaches and challenges, but also on how they maybe have a gap to the political visions outlined at a certain point in time. And you will make us familiar with different ways on how to bridge this gap that we are facing. We are very much looking forward to your interesting presentation. And to our audience, just once more at the start, you can put some questions into the feed or to the chat because we will have also a short Q&A session then after the presentation by Maria Vassilakou. Maria, the floor is yours. It is a great pleasure to have you with us. We are very excited and looking to your presentation.
Well, good morning, everybody. It's such a pity that I cannot be with you physically in Leipzig, but at least virtually. And I will start sharing my screen so that we can actually get started with my presentation immediately. Now, I will be speaking today about the vision of climate neutrality, of climate neutral cities and regions in Europe, about bridging the gap from vision to reality. And don't get me wrong, you have heard I've been actually a city politician, well, most of my life, to be honest. So you may excuse if my focus starts from cities. But as you will see, it's about time we all realize that it is not the scale of the city. It is more or less the scale of the region, and especially the metropolitan regions, that we need to address in order to challenge, to tackle the challenges of the future. Now, we are already in the metropolitan century. We know that by mid-century, 85% of the world's population will be living in vast metropolitan areas. And it's about managing growth. If we manage growth, we can manage to use it as an opportunity and actually leave this to the past. Because we all know that in the second phase of agglomeration, well, especially metropolitan areas are facing a vast number of challenges. Let me say here first and foremost, let me mention the high costs for housing, the high demand for infrastructure investment, but also urban sprawl, congestion, pollution. And well, let's say that the role of national states is not exactly what is needed from metropolitan areas most of the times. I would say most of the times it's about pushing them even further out of their borders, and this causes spatial disparities and, of course, the gap between the rich and the poor growing. Now, from vision to mission, putting a man on the moon again. What am I talking about? Back in the 60s, at the beginning of the 60s, actually nobody believed that by the end of the 60s, it would be made possible that the first man would be walking on the moon. Back then, they decided to focus all their attempts towards this direction, to focus grants, to focus research and innovation. And within a decade, they actually made it. And this is where we stand again today with regard to the vision of climate neutrality. Now, the European Union has decided, with regard to so many challenges that the planet is facing today, to actually focus considerable, amounts of money towards research and innovation within 5 mission areas. That is, once again, targeted towards achieving very bold missions. And as you can see, one of these mission areas has to do with cities. It's about climate neutral and smart cities. Why? Well, what they asked for us, I should also say, they for each city they created boards. I am a member of the board on climate neutral smart cities, and they asked us to be bold and inspirational, to indicate a clear direction, to be ambitious but realistic. They asked us to adopt a bottom-up approach, and what is extremely important, to produce a design that engages the citizens in co-designing, co-creating, and puts them at the heart of the mission and gives them an active role. Why cities? Well, I think we all know the arguments why, but let me just mention once again that cities are responsible for the consumption of 65% of the world's overall energy consumption. And they're growing rapidly. And in the face of the Paris Agreement, but also of the SDGs, we know that it is metropolitan areas, it is cities and the surrounding areas where we can actually make the difference within this century. So what we have proposed is 100 climate neutral cities by 2030, by and for the citizens. And as you can see, already the title of the mission indicates the importance of the role of citizens within the accomplishment of this mission. It is about a new model of city governance. So it's a holistic approach. It's about integrated planning, and it's about a deep and continuous collaboration between all stakeholders, a new role for citizens, a climate city contract that I will be speaking about in a second, and a new integrated form of funding and financing. So we aim at creating a one-stop shop, a lending and blending facility, so what we're talking about is an overall design of a mission that is financed, that is planned all together, streamlined, and that once again has a very, very strong holistic, systemic transformation approach. You can see here the complex governance that the accomplishment of such a mission actually entails. So when a city participates, and when we're speaking about cities, we mean it may be a part of a city, it may be a city in its entirety, but in many cases it will be a region. So it will be a cooperation between several cities that will be participating in the mission altogether. And you can see the complex, once again, interplay between the different levels, the European level, the regional and national level, and the local level to achieve this mission. It's about different instruments. So we need financial instruments, we need data management, data harmonization, we need research and innovation streamlined towards the direction. We need cross-sectoral governance and most notably structures for citizen participation. And what you can here see is the overall design of the different phases and stages of the mission. At the heart of the mission is the so-called Climate City contract. So we start with an open call with an expression of interest on behalf of the cities that want to participate. Then the creation of an overall climate neutrality strategy by the city involving all stakeholders and the citizens in active roles. Then the Climate City contract is signed, and then we proceed to the evaluation of the mission. Now, what we also know is that when it comes to how this can be tackled, the biggest part concerns buildings and energy use, and then, of course, transportation. This is just to give you an idea of what needs to be done in cities and areas towards climate neutrality. We have looked into the investment as well. Here again, we can see what are the biggest chunks, let's put it this way, of investment needed in different areas. There's an estimate of approximately 10,000 euro per citizen in order to achieve the mission. And investment should come predominantly from companies, a small part from citizens themselves as well. It's about hybrid private-public investment vehicles that are to be created, and less than, or let's put it another way, 10% maximum of the investment should come from the public hand. That is budgets, grants, subsidies, etc. Just a brief look at the KPIs. So when we're talking about climate neutrality, we're speaking about scope 1 and 2, straight from the beginning, and by 2030, also emissions from scope 3. And here's a brief look at the roadmap. The expression of interest would start sometime later in 2021. Then we proceed with the selected cities to the phase of creating their application and the Climate City contracts. This will take, of course, different amounts of time according to the preparedness level of different cities throughout Europe. But we plan by 2023 to have started with everybody, with the implementation actually of the mission. And at the time being, already several Green Deal calls have started. There will be cascading calls with regard to the European Green Deal, the one that is actually right now open until the end of January, actually concerns the creation of this very, very important one-stop shop that will facilitate, most notably, the financing of the different Climate City contracts of cities and regions that will be participating. Now, so much to the background, but what about the transition? How do we manage this? Now, we all know that cities and regions often face so-called wicked problems as opposed to businesses. I would say the most important ones are the fragmented jurisdiction limits that have an impact on leadership and initiative. And of course, power is subordinated to higher tiers of government, limited access to capital, low investment rate. All these are wicked problems, as you can see, that Greg Clark and Tim Moonen have identified in a wonderful report that they have created for the city of Vienna some years ago with regard to metropolitan governance. There are regional dynamics, and ignoring them means a phenomenon that we call Los Angelization. So it means suffering from coordination and capacity problems. There's a lot of competition and fragmented efforts within the region, incoherent or even conflicting messages. In the end, it's about missed opportunities. What should metro reforms address? Well, the OECD says growth management. That means focusing on transport, land, housing, fiscal systems. The World Bank says planning, institutions, creating institutions, investment initiatives. Here you can see just an example of how this is done and how, once again, Tim Moonen and Greg Clark from the Business of Cities, where you have really precise advice on the different parts and issues, what can be done in different metropolitan regions according to where they stand right now. So this is what it actually looks like. But then I would like to focus today on the how, because I think that we all know the what has to be done. But right now, facing the challenge of implementing all this, actually, the most interesting question most of the times is the how. We look at here yet again the Business of Cities, city planning versus metropolitan planning. So you can see city-focused planning has a single jurisdiction, single tier, land use and infrastructure focus, for instance, whereas metropolitan planning has an integrated approach, long-term, private sector, has to regard the private sector as a partner, and so on and so forth. And here, once again, we can compare the options. We can see that we have, for instance, sectoral policies in cities very often, whereas we need integrated planning when it comes to the regional level. It's about networked governance, spatial cohesion, high coordination. I say this is the biggest challenge that we're actually facing. When it's about the transition from city to region, it's about leaving antagonism behind and understanding regions as functional entities. So it's about cities and suburbs and peri-urban areas and rural areas surrounding a city and looking at it and focusing on its entirety. So these are the challenges we're facing and the required transitions. Look at retrofitting, for example. Here we need to make the shift from corporate to individual. That means coming into the houses of people. And how do we make it? How can we make the shift there and facilitate actually that individual homes are retrofitted at a high scale? When it comes to energy, it's the other way around. It's from local to systemic. We have thousands of excellent local initiatives when it comes to green energy, to clean energy throughout Europe. But how do we scale up all this? How does it become systemic? When it comes to transforming mobility, it's about the shift from infrastructures towards services. Then it's about the cultural shift from consultation to citizen action. When it comes to governance, it's about realizing that it's not about the state providing everything, but the role changes towards the entire ecosystem management. That means stakeholder management in the quadruple helix. And when it comes to financing, it's from pilot to scale. So we need a new paradigm for the regions. Thinking out of the box, stepping out of silo politics, integrated urban and regional planning. We will be able to hear a lot about the Leipzig Charter later, so I won't be going deeper into this. The new culture of cooperation and collaboration, and once again, scaling up, so partnering for bankability. And within this new paradigm, we need innovative financing and legal instruments, systemic innovation. So the transition from closed to open systems, especially when I think about cities and regions and making this transition. It's about technical and social innovation, and it's about governance innovation and a new role for citizens, the citizens and regions. Now let's look into different regions and what they're doing today and what can we learn from these examples. Starting with transport, the whole issue of transport, where we need systemic innovation. There's an excellent example, for instance, where we can learn from Stockholm that introduced a congestion charge by first actually investing within the region into improved public transport connections, and then introduce the congestion charge, refinancing the investment within the entire region via the congestion charge. And a second excellent example would be the region of Mafra in Portugal, surrounding Lisbon, where several municipalities, more than 40 municipalities, came together with private public transport operators to introduce the €365 public transport annual ticket, following Vienna's example. But the issue is that they managed to actually discuss and agree upon such a ticket as an entire region. And we have an example that is comparable also from the surroundings of Vienna, the Verkehrsverbund Ostregion, which is Vienna plus the state of Burgenland plus this federal state of Lower Austria, that have, for instance, introduced together a youth ticket where youths can actually travel throughout the entire region at a rate of €70 per year. But this is just a few examples of what can be done and achieved at the regional level. If I look into the future, I say it's about sharing schemes. It's about demand-responsive bus services that can be the way to solve the transport problems in rural areas. It may be about open last-mile delivery systems, given that we have the technical innovation that we need in order to achieve this. And it's about, of course, expanding mobility as a service projects from cities to entire regions. Let's look into integrated planning. Very encouraging example from Copenhagen. This is something I think most of us must have seen, the so-called famous finger plan with integrated spatial strategies for land use across the sectors. We have areas around assigned for urban growth, integrated transport planning, and a shared climate plan and vision and brand. I think that this is one of the best examples I know of regional cooperation up to now, followed by Paris, that after long discussions and struggles has formed the Métropole du Grand Paris, where we have the municipalities within the Greater Paris region working together. And from 2016 onward, they have achieved alignment of their plans with each other. And also, which is most important, they have a new intermunicipal governance structure, and also allocating funding together. So this is actually one of the most tight examples when it comes to the new ways of tight governance within metropolitan regions. And then the very encouraging example of cross-border collaboration from the Öresund region, where you have the southern Sweden region and the Copenhagen region working together for years now with established cooperation structures, aligned local plans, a shared vision to be the first climate neutral metro region worldwide, shared investment and infrastructures, and most important, shared revenue. Now, you have a trend towards strategy development as a PPP, most notably the example of the London Stansted-Cambridge consortium, which actually is formed as on a membership basis and works together with stakeholders from the entire region to produce a plan, an integrated plan for the entire region up to Cambridge, and is one of several examples worldwide of how nowadays strategy development is being actually is being held as a PPP, involving once again the private sector and different stakeholders straight from the beginning. Then we can take a look at the Greater Manchester area, where from 2011, the Greater Manchester Combined Authority was formed, and where what I find extremely important is the focus straight from the beginning on the entire metro region as a point of reference when developing strategies, stakeholder coalitions, and governance models. So this is one place, pretty much like in Paris, where new governance instruments were developed, where blunt tools were changed, were turned into effective governance, and where actually the city itself managed the transition between focusing on its own jurisdiction, borders, well, leaving this behind, and now taking once again the entire region as a point of reference and working actively with stakeholders.
Maria, thank you very much for the very interesting examples. Just to also allow for some questions from the audience, I'd just like to remind them to put them into the feed and maybe ask you to close in about 2 minutes. Thank you.
I can make this. So we have here once again also an example of Swedish cities coming together, Spanish cities right now forming a consortium to be part of the mission, or the Oslo region that has actually put together 78 municipalities to create a joint branding initiative that has been actually very, very successful within the last decade. And let me sum it up by showing you also the examples of Amsterdam, where we have the PACWIS and several initiatives of involving the citizens in public plural partnerships, and actually together forming visions and strategies for the entire region with an active role, once again, for the citizens. Now, what are the main takeaways and perspectives out of this? I would say, first of all, it's about a new culture of cooperation, and there are trends, once again, towards new tight governance models for the regions, but also hybrid models involving businesses and the private sector. There are emerging public plural partnerships involving the people in strategy creation and in concrete action. There's a trend towards PPPs. That means, once again, an active role for businesses and for regional private partners that will actually themselves develop initiatives in terms of bringing the city forward, cooperate with the city, and develop new strategies and actions towards climate neutrality. There are branding trends for entire regions that start realizing that it is not only about regional cooperation, but creating a common brand, common storytelling, a common identity, where we may have up to 100 municipalities working together. There's a new leadership that we need in order to do this, most notably one that actually involves collaboration at its heart. Just to give you one last example, it is also about sharing costs and sharing benefits, something that has been actually achieved at the very, very local level. I would say intermunicipal revenue redistribution, for instance, when deciding to create business parks in the past. This is what we need actually now, looking into the future and climate neutrality. It's the need to realize that we need joint investment, and then once again, actually redistributing benefits from investment throughout the entire region. So realizing it's not about the city, it's not about rural areas alone or peri-urban areas, it's about realizing that we are in our entirety a functional entity that needs, once again, to work closely together, to plan together, to finance together, and to use revenue together in order to achieve the very, very ambitious vision of climate neutrality. And with this, I would leave it at that and say thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. If we would be in a big room with lots of people with us, I'm sure there would be a great applause coming up now. Comments are in the chat also applauding for an excellent presentation. So Maria, thank you very much for sharing these rich views and examples with us. We only have very short time, so with the kind question for very short answers. We are asked, how can we actually institutionalize the rural-urban, let's say, partnerships and also linkages? How can we bring that really into institutions when we face administrative borders in our day-to-day practice?
Well, I would say that the mistake we make is that we always think we have to create new institutions. And don't get me wrong, I find it wonderful what Paris has done, or Manchester. This is why I brought these examples. But then we all know that this takes years of struggle and discussion. So why don't we take the other direction and create soft, actually, structures where we can meet, where we can discuss, and where we can learn how to create common strategies involving, once again, citizens and businesses. So it's, let's think of our roles towards stakeholder management, leading the direction and organizing stakeholder management. And this is what I meant when I talked about the shift towards open systems, not trying, to know everything in advance yourself as a municipality, but work together within the entire region to produce something new.
Thank you very much. Also, the involvement of business, of the public, as you are saying, is addressing one of the questions, asking for good examples of public-private partnership cooperation. A final question with regard to a short answer, please. Do you have specific recommendations, again, looking to the global south? What can be translated, or who are maybe good context points that you would recommend?
I would say what is the most important part when it comes to the global south is, for one thing, advising with regard to the creation of citizen involvement structures, because this is what actually not only the global south, but the European south also lacks, especially when I think of Southeastern Europe. And the second most important issue is actually investment, which means, once again, here teaming up, partnering for bankability. So what we need is cooperations with the South of strong partners from our parts of the world in order, once again, to create joint projects, once again, and to partner up and scale up for bankability.
Partnering is for sure one of the best words we can take over to continue also in our conference. It was outstanding to have you with us. Thanks a lot for taking the time. And we are moving to the next input, also from Vienna.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you.
Thanks.